Hey guys, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a video for our 8-week ENC 1101 class to cover the body paragraphs for our essay 2, the commercial analysis essay. All right, so I've given similar spiels, I think, on some other videos. So I just want to mention briefly at the top, like this is another case where the blueprint hasn't changed. You know, what you are supposed to do in order to, basically what a body paragraph has to have, that suddenly hasn't changed between essay 1 and 2. You still need to have a topic sentence at the beginning of the paragraph that tells us what supporting argument you're making. You need to have 3 or more sentences that support the supporting argument, and then you need to have a sentence that concludes your argument and then transitions us into the next paragraph. All right, so the part that often throws people off with this essay is, what the heck am I arguing? How do I argue even? And so just as a reminder, so the thesis is supposed to be company X appeals to audience Y, and Y has to have 2 descriptors. So a classic example in my case, be Coca-Cola appeals to middle-aged men. And so how would you actually argue that in the commercial? So I'm going to try to walk you through an example or two here in a minute. I hope the audio works. I'll include these links on here, but I did want to mention to you that how to put this. What I'm going to show you, it's literally just an example, like based on these commercials, here's what you could do. But really, this is meant to be an open, like instead of me restricting what you can and can't write about, it's actually the other way around. Like anything that's in this commercial that you can argue uniquely appeals to this group. So if you're saying that this appeals to young women, right? Maybe there's a song in the commercial. You could argue that the singer appeals to young women more than other groups. You could argue that the song itself, what are the lyrics? How and why do those appeal to young women? You could talk about the cast. Is it mostly young women in the commercial, or at least as our main characters? Are they talking about or doing things that, this group would understand and it would resonate with them in a way that it wouldn't with like young men or maybe even older women? All right, but like I said, I think that this is going to make a bit more sense once we walk through some stuff here. So again, I rarely share screen with audio, so I'm crossing my fingers this will work here. So I feel like I should apologize in advance for the potato quality video here. This is a video I've been using for many years for this exact essay, and well, it was filmed a long time ago. It says here it was uploaded 14 years ago, and let me tell you, it was filmed a lot earlier than that. So this is a Dr. Pepper ad. I was going to go through it one time and then do some analysis real quick like. Okay, so I wanted to, dang it, go back. There we go. So again, I don't know how well the audio carries through there, but the idea is you got this woman getting married. It's a Dr. Pepper commercial. You got this woman getting married, and I don't know if this term is still alive in the culture anymore, but she is a total bridezilla. She is the joke is that she's conducting everything like she's a drill sergeant or something instead of a bride to be. All right. So just for the sake of argument, I want to emphasize the whole point of this assignment is, everyone could look at the same set of commercials and come up with completely different audiences and still get good grades. So this isn't a matter of like make the professor happy by picking the one possible answer this could be. So I want to instead, it was just arbitrarily, we're going to say this commercial appeals to young women. Why are we doing that? Well, there's some guys in the deep background here, but this commercial, otherwise, there's nothing but young women in here. Now, your mileage may vary. I don't know how young some of you are, but for our purposes here, let's say that it's women that are, say, 25 to 35. You can narrow down a range or whatever in your own paper. So what would if I'm writing a paper, if my thesis is Dr. Pepper is appealing to young women, and I'm looking at this commercial, What are some things I might argue in my body paragraphs? Okay, well, we're technically already looking at one of them, and I mentioned it that, hey, there's almost nothing but young women in the commercial. And so I joke about this a lot with the face-to-face students that you never have to ignore the obvious. Most of the time, there are exceptions, but most of the time, the people you're seeing on screen are modeling, this like, hey, if Dr. Pepper wants young women drinking Dr. Pepper, they're going to put young women on screen drinking Dr. Pepper. So very often the people you see are a powerful clue as to who the audience is, right? Another thing we're looking at, and before y'all throw anything at the screen, I'm going to say marketers always deal in stereotypes. And so you can make analyses based on the stereotypes that they are using without yourself believing or endorsing those stereotypes. So, for instance, you could make an argument that this commercial is appealing to young women because most of the colors we see are quote unquote girly colors. There's lots of purple, lots of pink, lots of white. In case you're wondering, stereotypical colors that appeal to men are usually darker colors, dark browns, dark blues, black, et cetera, et cetera. So you could talk about, some color analysis. And research is, I think, optional in this essay, but you might be surprised how much research there is about like color theory, which colors appeal to whom. For instance, bright red and yellow appeal to kids most of all. That's why you see those colors at like McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's and Sonic, basically all these food places, right? Okay, some other stuff we can get into. I mentioned how research is optional, but I did want to say that we said that this is appealing to young women 25 to 35. I think this number is always crawling up, and I can certainly understand why. But I think I did some research recently, and the average marriage age in America was somewhere like 27, 28, 29. It's in that upper 20s. So that's a thing too. If you are a company, you're making your wedding themed commercial for a group that's, women aged 25 to 35, statistically in that age range, you're likely to, likelier at least, to be married or to have at least been in a bridal party like poor Martinez here. So that's another area where this would be kind of fitting. It's like, hey, they would understand this in a way that a younger group wouldn't. Like teenage girls aren't really focused on, wedding details necessarily, like being a good bridal party member, and something older women aren't really focused on because it's in their rearview mirror. Now, if you want to kind of extend that idea, you could say that the bridezilla here is part of that. That like, if you are, if you're in this target demographic and if you're likelier to have either gotten married or been part of a bridal party by now, that means you know how stressful this can be. And you know that you either maybe have been this person or you have known somebody like this. So that's one of those things where it's like the rest of us are like, yeah, I guess it's funny. She's a drill sergeant or whatever. But other people would have this kind of lived experience of like, oh yeah, I dealt with somebody being a crazy tyrant like that. Incidentally, this is not the case with every commercial, but this commercial, it's good to get an idea for who your audience surrogate character is, right? So like the main character is that bridezilla, right? At least she's the one that's occupying most of the time and attention, but she's not necessarily who we're supposed to sympathize with. That's why we're laughing at her at the end because we're seeing her butt. Instead, we're meant to sympathize with poor Martinez here. She's the one, I think we're probably right at that point. You eyeballing me, Martinez? And you hear the narrator, it's amazing the sacrifices you make for friendship. So the idea that, symbolically, if you're a young woman watching this, you're meant to sympathize with Martinez, the one that is putting up with all this shit. And so, that's even part of the marketing. It's like, we know you make sacrifices for your friends, but you at least don't have to sacrifice when it comes to this flavor. And even outside the wedding context, I'm going to sound impossibly old saying this, but you could make an argument that that kind of thing appeals to young women because it's like, all right, when you're younger, this kind of weird friendship drama, oh, I can't believe she's so crazy. That's a lot more high. You get to my age, it's like you're lucky if you're seeing your friends, once a year. So that it's not really this kind of thing. It wouldn't resonate with an older audience quite as much as it resonates with the young female audience. Same that. All right. And then finally, I might be reaching here, but there's a little tagline. The English professor, I'm always going to focus when there's text on the screen. So the diet that tastes like a regular. So one of the things I've mentioned, and for some of y'all, I might be the ghost of Christmas yet to come. When you are part of like a wedding party, a bridal party, whatever, a big thing is that like the dresses are often ordered way in advance, and that can create some tension on the big day. Like, am I gonna fit into this dress they ordered me months ago? And so it's not uncommon for somebody getting ready for that to be constantly dieting. And probably not loving the dieting, right? Like, oh, God, I can't wait for this damn wedding to be over. So you have this little tagline here, the diet that tastes like regular. Now, of course, that's been part of Dr. Pepper's marketing taglines forever, but you can make an argument here. It's like they're understanding that dieting is not a regular thing. It's not an enjoyable thing. We know you've been putting up with it, for this wedding, but now here's a way you can treat yourself without worrying about whether it's going to keep you from fitting into that dress. All right, I think we have the time. I hope we have the time. I wanted to do one more. Oh, I want to stop screen sharing. Sorry. Mr. Magoo figures out screen share here. All right. So there's a different commercial here. Now, I hope this doesn't throw you off. This is another Dr. Pepper commercial that, as you're going to tell right away, this is aimed at something very different, a very different argument here. So let's, or a very different argument. They are making very different, but a very different audience. Let's look at it and talk about it. So this is maybe a little simpler in its own way. There's only one human, actor in here. So this guy is a representative of who they're trying to appeal to. Now, again, you could make all sorts of arguments. Traditionally, when I do this as an example in a face-to-face class, students will say, all right, like men 40 to 50 or just middle-aged men, right? Which is absolutely fine. So for the purposes of our discussion, we're going to say Dr. Pepper in this commercial is appealing to middle-aged men. Now, I do want to pause here, just a friendly reminder that in your own essay, all three of your commercials, you need to be arguing or appealing to a single audience. I just wanted you to see that, like, yeah, you can't just grab three, Dr. Pepper commercials. Some of them are appealing to very different audiences. But let's say, what is going on here that might appeal to middle-aged men? All right. So you could argue just the fact that, his idea of a good time is getting into the great outdoors here. Now, obviously, it doesn't mean young people can't enjoy the outdoors, but, can't you just hear like the voice of an older person here? Back in my day, we didn't spend all our time playing on phones. We were outside, So it's got that kind of appeal to, somebody that wants to be disconnected from the rest of the world. They want to maybe relive the time when, oh yeah, we were just playing outside. So you could have a body paragraph just talking about that subject matter in and of itself. You could also have either in that paragraph or maybe in another body paragraph, you could talk a bit about that little song that he's singing, that weird little custom song. There's no place like no man's land for me. And so what's going on there? The idea that he likes the idea of getting away from it all, going to an area that, nobody else is in, or maybe nobody else can be in, a so-called no man's land, and he likes to go in there. All right, I guess I've never really thought about this. If you wanted to make, we're probably reaching for an analysis here, but like no man's land, of course, a term that originated in like World War I. Like that's the area of the battlefield you try to go across, you're getting killed. So you could make an argument like an older person likelier to be fixated on like World War I, World War II. So that idea, he's referring to this like, sure, he's just walking in the woods, but symbolically he feels like he's conquering and surviving in a no man's land, something that an older man might vibe with that a younger man wouldn't. So anyway, there's some other stuff in here. There's a thing that I always point out to my students, and I think they always think I'm pulling their chain here, but he tears off a bit of the tree and then he eats it. And it's like, okay, that's not a realistic thing. What the heck could that represent? Now, I feel like I have some insight here because, well, I am a middle-aged man. And so I always ask students, hey, what would you actually get a lot of if you were eating a tree bark? I mean, don't do it, but what would you be consuming a lot of? And then it takes a little, oh, fiber. It's like, yeah. So the idea that he's an old man, he's a little worried maybe about his weight and about his digestion. So he's getting a little more fiber in his diet. And I always feel like I'm calling myself out here because I tell the students, like, come to Dr. Snellgrove's office. What are you going to see? Well, whole lot of granola bars, sad granola bar, lunch here. And sure enough, much like the sad sack in this commercial, the highlight of my meal is usually my 0-calorie soda. So I see myself in a bit in this ad, perhaps. All right. Speaking of depressing things about middle-aged people, all right. So we've got this thing here. It's another comedy bit where it's like, oh, wow, he's just one-handed carrying this knocked down tree on his own. And it's like, okay, that's over the top. What's going on there? He's showing how strong he is. Now, there's multiple things you could get into in your analysis. You could talk about how the implication that if you drink Dr. Pepper, you'll be strong like this guy. Nothing's wrong with doing that kind of analysis where it's like products are usually sold as solutions. It's like, hey, you'll be stronger once you drink this. But you could also go a step further. Why is being strong, or at least appearing to be strong, a high priority for this fellow in particular? Well, for some of you, I'm the ghost of Christmas yet to come. There is an idea as you get older where, this is where midlife crises come from. So a middle-aged man sees that, like, there's a new generation. They're literally faster and stronger, and there can be kind of an existential crisis there. Like, okay, I am, do I still have a role in this world? Am I still, functional? Am I still valid when, you got all of these people are stronger and faster and blah, blah, blah. So for someone that might have experienced that midlife crisis, or at least they're in danger of it, here's this guy like, oh yeah, drink this Dr. Pepper. You'll be strong. You'll be vital. You'll be relevant. All right. There's other stuff. Sometimes the analysis you make is depending on the cultural connections you can make. Like, here's this goofy bit where the guy fishes, a literally frozen, Dr. Pepper out of the water, and he cracks it open to drink it. One of my students did some research one time, and this is in a very explicit, like, visual callback to a late 1970s beer commercial. And we talked about that's one more bit of evidence that this appeals to middle-aged men. They'd be the only ones, literally, that might remember the commercial, and might get what they were doing. All right. So there's other stuff in here, other arguments you can make, like he gets the bird to fetch him a drink. He gets the bear is rowing his kayak later. So it's like he's a master of nature. So again, that idea that to the middle-aged man, the idea of conquering nature, conquering the great outdoors. He didn't just come visit. He became the ruler of all these things, like Tom Bombadil style. So you could argue how and why that's important, and kind of some of that goes back to the idea of the midlife crisis thing, right? For the middle-aged man audience, when you feel like you don't have control of most of these things, like, I'm going to try to take control of nature instead. It's kind of like all those jokes online, right? Men will be rode by a bear instead of going to therapy, but the idea of how and why that's important to this group. Speaking of silly things important to this group, we have the taglines here. So we've got the manliest low-calorie soda in the history of mankind. So obviously they're being tongue-in-cheek here, but there is this idea. It's like, who is going to be super concerned about, like, I hope no one thinks I'm like a girl. I hope no one thinks I'm womanly. Everyone needs to know I'm a manly man. I don't think I'm exactly blowing your minds to say that's something older men worry about, right? That's for younger generations, there's a lot of like, I don't care what you think, I'm doing what I want to do, whatever. So it's usually the fragile, like, I hope they think I'm super manly. That's usually older dudes. So you could say that this is a way of appealing to that. And it ties into the very last bit here, where he's like, bold flavor. And of course that's silly, right? On the face of it, that's silly. Bold flavor. Drinking a soda is not exactly bold. But all of this goes back to the analysis we've been making about, like, okay, somebody that wants to see themselves as conquering nature, that wants to see themselves as the hero of a no man's land. They want to see themselves as a bold adventurer and not just a middle-aged dude having a sip of soda. All right. So I hope I haven't thrown too much stuff at you. Basically, all of the things that we have been talking about, all those things can be body paragraphs on their own. And this is just scratching the surface. Like I said, if there's anything in the ad where you're like, oh, I get it, that was in there to appeal to this group, write about it. That's literally all you're doing. And I feel bad, like I'm making it sound easier than I know it is, but it is something you can do. And of course, I believe in you, and you know the deal. If you have any questions about this assignment or about anything else, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me at 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one. Bye.